First, welcome to the Advisor Lab. Super excited. Um, you've had a very impressive career, Tyson. I've seen all the Forbes acclamations and Barron's, and it's been pretty awesome. And obviously, your involvement in nonprofit and charities and things of that nature. So I'm excited to talk to you. Myself too. I saw you're a bit of a golfer and an outdoorsman, which is cool. So maybe we could just kick it off. You could talk a little bit about just, you've been leading Forum Wealth Advisors, right, for 25 years now, helping advisors plan their exits. And I guess you've got your book, Total Succession. So, what inspired you to write that? Maybe we could start there.
Yeah. So what's interesting about the awards is when I stopped focusing on trying to get awards, the funny thing, and just focused on doing the right thing for clients and
Right.
building a team of that had the same culture and values of wanting to do that. It's amazing. All of a sudden the awards started showing up. The book Total Succession came to be. I'm a student teacher by my wiring. So I love to learn things and I love to teach them to other people, and then also try and make what's really complicated as simple as possible to understand. And hence why I'm a student teacher, not a student professor. Anyway, the book Total Succession. So about a year ago, for about the third time, almost 2 years ago now, I had looked to creating my own RIA. And I had been the career of, hired right out of college, which they didn't do back then, for the boiler room, cold calling people in the A.G. Edwards brokerage firm, which is a great firm. Stuck around, did extremely well. And then that got bought by Wachovia. That was supposed to be a great thing in '07 until it wasn't, when it went under in '08. Then that became Wells Fargo. And so I stuck in the brokerage realm until about 2014, left to come into Raymond James. And when I made the switch to Raymond James, I thought I was going into the RA. That's how little I didn't know what I didn't know. I went into their hybrid,
Mm-hmm.
where you were 1099, you had your own firm, and then was looking to go into the RA space as I watched a bunch of my peers go in the RA space. And in the process, I also started looking at, do I want to go into these aggregators or integrators and get rolled up and they just solve all these problems for me? And I decided I wasn't ready for that. Not that that's a bad thing, but what I was starting to realize in the process of meeting some of these, doing the NDAs, doing looking at the offers, understanding how they're structured in partnerships and holding companies, and you can be W-2 and you get stock, all these different things. I started realizing, I'm like, man, no one knows this stuff. Like, I've been a CFP, I have a certification in exit planning, but you're really getting into the weeds, very specific in our industry, that I realized, wait a minute, I own the clients, or I had owned the clients for 25 years. I thought it was in my business. Registration, I own them. If you actually are a W-2 or a 1099 employee for any of these brokerage firms that are out there, most likely you don't realize that you created a shell company and it doesn't own anything. The registrations, depending on how you're registered, are owned by you individually, and that limits how you can buy or sell things, who can do it. And I'm like, gosh, I don't think anybody knows this stuff. And I restructured my firm, created the holding company, created partnership, created different stocks. And in the process, I just realized, I'm like, you know what? If a third of the industry is retiring in the next 5 to 7 years, and they're all looking at this stuff, and why don't we put together a manual, which is Total Succession? It's basically how a financial advisor can retire, be fully compensated, and yet keep their clients' interests first. Because the other thing I'm realizing is there's some big money moving around, and it sounds really exciting, and you get it all googly eyed. But at the end of the day, what's best? You should be making this if it's best for your client, right? And so yeah, the book's 3 parts. It's basically kind of what's going on in the industry that this is even needed. It's part 2 is kind of a space framework that we created an acronym around. Do you see what your future looks like? Are you preparing for what your future looks like? Are you acting on what your future looks like? Are you going to commit to what your future looks like? And are you ultimately going to exit? Because everyone's exiting. You're either going to sell it or you're dying with it. It's one or the other. And then the third part, which is fun, is, okay, is it private equity? Is it an integrator? Is it an aggregator? Is it an internal succession to a family member or another team member or another advisor, the broker next door? So what's your, and they all have pros and cons. So what we're effectively putting together is kind of an educational guide to succession for the financial services industry.
Are you also providing any kind of services to people? Like if someone reads your book and says, "This is awesome. I'd love to talk with you more, Tyson, and work with you maybe on a consultative basis," or is that something you do informally, or is that something you've set up actually as a business that's part of what you do?
Yeah, the no, no, the sense. Well, let me back up. Yes, for 27 years, I'll spend 90 minutes with anybody
Hmm.
for free to try and help them. No, I'm not setting. We interviewed in the podcast that we've done, and then in the book, we've interviewed folks. There are people out there that that's all they do. That's their career. That's their niche.
Right.
I'm just another advisor that wants to help advisors make better decisions with what they're doing with their clients. It's a way of kind of, uh, I get out of bed in the morning, try and make a difference in people's lives. And if I can help advisors make better decisions for their clients, who knows what that impact ends up looking like? And that's enough for me.
Hmm.
Um, we have in 27 years retired 7 advisors, so we've acquired some practices, and that may or may not be there. There's definitely going to be some interesting fit there, and that's not what the book is about. It's
Right.
there's not a there's I don't have a dog in the fight really. It was just basically to try and put out a guide that somebody else could read, and sure, if they have some questions, I'm happy to answer them, but outside of that, we're not trying to create a new business around it.
Hmm. And was it very evident, like right from the jump, that this type of exit planning is it's not a transaction per se as much as it's something that you have to plan for over a long period of time.
Yeah, I think part of it's a wake up call though, because I have interviewed folks where they were going to turn it over to their junior advisor until the multiples got to the point that the junior advisor doesn't want to take that kind of debt and the senior advisor doesn't want to carry that kind of paper. So all of a sudden they had been working on this for all these years, but when the rubber met the road, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, this isn't my solution just blew up in my face.
Hmm.
Um, or in my own personal case, it's like, yeah, I got everything. Succession's done. I got all my agreements in place until I actually went through the process of taking and looking at another offer and what does that look like? And I started realizing I was wholly in my legal setup was completely inadequate for what I wanted to do, for how I was going to be able to bless some of the team members that helped me get here. And it's just the classic case that plumbers, pipes, leak, shoemakers, kids don't have any shoes, right? It's just we are so focused on helping our clients, we're sometimes not doing some of the planning we should be doing for ourselves. And that's kind of what this guide or this book has been written for, is to spark the curiosity and to set some things in motion of what do they want their exit to look like? And what do they need? What help do they need? What blind spots do they have? Who's out there to help them? Or are they better off rolling up into somebody that has turned that's all they do is take over advisors so they don't have to figure this stuff out and help their clients and move on.
So do you think that's the big issue? Like I know the stats, and maybe it's in your book, 37% of financial advisors are set to retire over the next decade, 10 trillion of assets, right? And yet fewer than 30% have like a formal succession plan. Is that it for these advisors? Why do they avoid this conversation? Is it just they're just too busy with their day to day and they don't want to deal with it, or they just don't get the time because it's not imminent tomorrow? I mean, are we facing some kind of crisis from a succession planning standpoint in wealth management because of this?
Yeah, I think the urgent crowds out the important. So you're just caught up in the decline. Again, you take the time to help your clients. You don't necessarily take the time to help yourself.
Right.
I think it's the same. Succession planning is viewed probably the same way estate planning is viewed by the public. The majority of people don't have an estate plan, though everybody's going to die. I think it's also the hard problem to solve because in essence, from an emotional standpoint, which we are emotional creatures, we all make decisions at the end of the day with a gut and an emotion. What's delaying the proper planning for succession, whether you're 35 or 85 years old, is having to realize this needs to go on outside of you. And you have to first admit to yourself it can go on outside of you, or if do you even really want it to go on? Because a lot of people have their egos tied into this, and it's their baby and they built it and they don't want to let it go and they don't want to admit that somebody else could take it on, or heaven forbid, they actually could do a better job. Uh, and I think that there's all kinds of reasons why I think it doesn't get done right. Um, and yet I'm of the belief that everybody should be trying to perfect what happens to your practice if you don't show up tomorrow, either because you chose to retire or because you are no longer able to work for whatever that reason is. Um, and it's interesting because some advisor, I had an advisor that thought he was never going to retire until he was holding his grandson. He's just like, I'm done. Like, there's nothing more important than trying to spend the next couple of years of being in part of this child's life. And because he had that triggering event, now he's regretting the fact he didn't have some things set in motion, because now he's going to try and transition his practice and work out of the position over the next 3 years while he's missing those first 3 years with the grandson. It's just like, and I think the space framework in the book is to try and take the advisor through. It's an acronym, right? Do you
Yep.
see what you want to do? Are you going to die at your desk? That's fine. Does your family know you want to die at your desk? Is your spouse going to be along for? Is your partner going to come along for that ride after waiting decades for you to maybe retire? Or are they bought into you're going to stay there for a couple more decades and really not be done? Do you see yourself transitioning? What does that look like? Is it like an all or nothing? I'm out. Or are you going to work it out? Like, what do you see? And do you take the space in your calendar and your time frame to ponder and to think about what is that? Because you'll frame a picture, and then it's a matter of, okay, when you see that, what do you have? What have you prepared to make that happen? And what needs to be prepared to make that happen? And there's coaches that are out there that can help with that. There's consultants out there that can help with that. And it's going to line up things you're preparing. These are all to-dos effectively. Okay, now we got to go act on some of these if we're going to do something. A lot of it boils down to the C, which is the commit aspect of, there's a lot of people that when you go to do the succession, you're going to turn things over to other people to help clients and those types of things. You have to commit to step back and let that happen. If you sell your practice and now you have a boss and you're working out an earnout, you have to commit that all of a sudden it's not yours anymore. And just, do you know that? And do you understand that? And are you going to buy into that? And can you see that ahead of time so you don't regret it? So you can ultimately exit on your terms, which is going back to what you saw, right? So this whole space framework. But I was talking to an advisor at a charity event recently, and he had sold the practice. They did their due diligence. They hired a consultant, and they were well compensated. And I'm sitting down with him, and it's 2 months later, and I said, "How's it going?" And he just is like, "I have a new stress I never thought I'd have." And I'm like, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, to get the number I wanted, I got these terms. These terms have these earnouts, and all of a sudden I got to grow my practice at 15% a year for the next 5 years. And I've never had to worry about growing. Like, I didn't care, right? I was running a firm and just doing the right thing, but now I'm conflicted because I gotta try and drive the revenue and find assets. And he's in his mid-60s. He's like, this isn't the stress I wanted. And that's why we wrote the book, because we want to just help people realize the pros and cons to the different options you have without basically the guy. It's not, this is the option. There isn't one one perfect for anybody. It's what do you want and what are the pros and cons to what you want? And how can we help you make a better educated decision with your life's work?
Is the step in that process within this space framework the one that advisors struggle with the most? Is that the taking their hands off the steering wheel that you alluded to earlier? Is that the toughest one? And if it is, or if it's something else, like, how do you help them with that?
I think I think the toughest one is answering the question, what do you want to do when you grow up? What do you want to do if you weren't doing the job? What do you want to do if you want to keep doing the job?
Hmm.
And because, especially because a lot of the, if you're listening to this, you're an entrepreneur, you're building a financial services practice, you've seen some success, and it's easier just every day to keep letting the clients and dealing with the practice than to solve the problem of what happens to you. Um, but Yeah, I think a lot of it is, and can you give yourself permission to walk away? Can you give yourself permission to have enough? There's some hard wiring here. It has nothing to do with financial advisors. It's just humanity that I think prevents some of the succession, or giving themselves permission to walk away. And my experience, in which we as advisors would see this with clients, is when it finally gets decided for you, you're going to decide whether or not you regretted putting it off. Right? If it gets decided for you from a health event, a life event, a marital or spousal pressure, the next generation showing up, um, you'll know whether or not you regretted putting this off. And my encouragement to folks is it's you owe it as it was said to me, part of your fiduciary responsibility is having a succession plan. You owe it to your clients to have a solution that if you dropped dead overnight and you woke up you're not there the next day, the team can now continue to take care of these people that entrusted your firm you with their life savings, that you thought through that. You owe that to them at the very least, in my opinion.
That's a that's a great point, and it's a good transition because I want to talk about the building of the bench, the G2 team, that legacy aspect. You said succession starts with your G2, right? What makes a great next gen leader? And how can these senior advisors identify them early?
Yeah. So, for decades, the misconception and the whining I've heard in the financial services industry is I can't find the rainmaker. I can't find the individual I'm going to hire to help grow my business. And the mistake is the thinking that you needed that or that you need that. What you may need to realize is that you've grown the business got to a point where the name recognition, the brand, the number of clients becomes its own business to create business. That I believe the Gen 2 advisors are the ones that now can care for the business and give excellent service. The Gen 2s I've hired are usually right out of college. So I don't want to brainwash anybody else. We've had them in a college internship program. So we got a little feel for how they like to work and not work, usually in their junior summer. And then we're going to work with them to adjust their classes their senior year to keep them on the books and or give them remote work and projects and see how we can keep them on. And then we have a position to hire for them when they come out the other end. Because I want to hire, what I found is these 20 somethings that once you find the ones that want to work, and once you find the ones that can pass the exams, and once you find the ones that want to relationally serve clients, they'll respond to those emails faster than I can get to them. They'll return the phone call faster than I can get to it. And they're answering the question, or they've been given the permission to say, I don't know, I'll get back to you on that. And all along trying to decide, do they need to loop me or another wealth advisor in to have a meeting if that's necessary? But I feel like the Gen 2 going forward are caretakers, not rainmakers. I feel like the firms themselves and just the need in the marketplace is going to drive the new business. That the idea that somehow you're cold calling or knocking on doors is going to find wealth. No, I feel like it's the family, the clients that have parents that are still alive to be helping in that situation, and then the clients that have kids they want to leave money to, and how to educate those little rascals. That I feel like the family tree is a huge opportunity for working with wealth, and the whole fear that you're going to lose clients. Well, if you're going to the idea that the inheritance they're going to go somewhere else, well, then you might you might lose some, but you're also you're a receptacle of those that actually are coming to you at the same time. That I just feel like the Gen 2, it's a lot easier to find the one that wants a salary, wants nothing to do with the portfolios because that can be done at a firm level, wants nothing to do with markets or investments. They want to do everything with planning, caring for the client, understanding what's going on in their health, what's going on in their travel plans, when are we buying a car the next time, home improvements, all the stuff that where the rubber meets the road in planning is a different advisor than you founded the company 20 years ago selling. And I think the industry is looking in the wrong place for their solution for what the future is.
So there's a lot of creative ways to compensate, like different equity structures. I'm sure you've seen different ones that work well for these G2s, right? To motivate them. Is there one or two that you would suggest you've seen work well, or is it just all over the map?
It is all over the map. What I've seen not work well, or what has consequences, is tying them to a percentage of specific revenue. If it's best in the firm that clients transfer from one associate to another, either because of you know sports affiliations or just kind of how they're wired and how they get along with people, or a lot of times in our firm, what we find is that we bring somebody on and they have a certain knowledge level. And after 3 or 4 years, they have a higher level of knowledge that they've earned the right to work with a higher sophistication of wealth. And so effectively about every 3 to 5 years, we're reshuffling who's servicing which clients to allow ourselves to be able to be better equipped for dealing with clients that have more complicated cases with associates that are prepared to be in those seats. And yet the simple mom and pop that have three, four, $500,000, we're still able to help, but we don't need a continual level of senior wealth advisors caring for clients that they have. It's a very simple case. The point is, when I've tied it to a percentage of revenue, when you go to try and move households somewhere else, these advisors want to cling to that because you tied their compensation to more, even though it may not be better for them or the firm, or more importantly, the client, for them to keep more. I have found, and I've been told by my team, they love the fact that they have a salary and they have a bonus that they can count on. And then the market dropped 20% 3 months ago. They didn't have to worry about their income going down. And I want my team that's on the phone dealing with the client not having the same emotional connection with the portfolios going down, with their income going down, with the client calling in upset that their portfolios are going down. I'd like one person on the side of that call to be calm, and because they know have a guaranteed salary and a bonus component, but for the most part, I feel like that's a better compensation. And I'm not saying they can't keep making more. That's not it. But what I have found is, instead of letting it be quarter to quarter or month to month in the volatility of the market versus smoothing compensation off based on profits from last year, which I already have, to bank cash flow for this year, that I'm just delaying the future growth by 12 months, but removing all the volatility by trying to make it immediate. I just feel is a much better culture to be working in than everybody in the firm is freaking out because the market dropped 20%, and it happens every couple of years.
Yeah. So speaking about the market, let's just talk about this. I'd love to hear your perspective. I mean, there's been a wave of M&A and wealth management, and I don't know if it's slowing down at all. Do you think the valuations are sustainable, or is this kind of bubbly?
Well, I think what's happening is, I feel that we're going back to the 90s in a sense, where you had all these little regional shops, and they all had their little culture and they all had their little feel, and you could kind of plug in and you felt like you're something, and they were growing. So I feel like we're in this trend, which I really think is until this generation retires, whoever's retiring versus not retiring. So I think we have 5 to 7 years, I think 2030 and a few years thereafter, if I put it on a calendar, that these companies are rolling up. And so if you're getting bought at, 8 to 12, 14 times EBITDA, uh, and the company that's buying you is worth 20 to 24, like, they'll do that all day long. What's going to happen in the end, though, is eventually the game's going to be done. Like, the acquisitions are basically done, the efficiencies have been created, and then you're going to get back to what the business has always been: organic growth. And that's where you're going to see winners and losers, and you're going to see what does that equity really shake itself out to. Because the problem is, and we've seen this in other asset classes. You saw this in real estate in the financial crisis, leading up to the financial crisis. It's like, okay, well, I'll buy you for 3 million. Someone else is going to buy it for 4 million. Someone else is going to buy it for 5 million. We keep rolling this thing up until all of a sudden no one else, like the last person that comes in, isn't going to be able to flip it. That different asset classes, different industries, this game has been played many times. Eventually, it needs to go back to, no, someone's got to be growing the revenues at 20% a year to reach that 20% multiple compounded over long periods of time. And I'm not saying there's not going to be a ton of wealth made, but there's going to be, there's risk.
Right.
And there's just still a lot of demand. So like I said, um, I think it's interesting times. And at the same time, um, the multiples that are being put out there, the funny money is in the earnouts, and it's just whether or not you're going to catch the right market cycle and you're going to be able to grow your revenues. Otherwise, what I found is a lot of the valuations really shrink back down to what they've kind of historically always been. They're inflated a little bit, but it's not.
Mhm.
It's not. If you don't grow out, if the deal structure being what I've seen, it's very different if you're cashing out all at once and you're selling your business. Go get a valuation of if you've got a check and you walked away versus what the earnouts are. And when the check you walk away, that multiple is not anywhere near what these earnouts are.
Let's move back to maybe the human side here before we close up. Talking about the clients, you know, you emphasize this a lot in your book. I think it's like clients are a big part of your legacy, of course. What's the biggest mistake advisors make when communicating to their clients during that transition of that exit?
I think the biggest one, I think they make a mistake without not communicating ahead of time. So if you're surprising the client because you just signed the deal and you're making a change and now you're asking the client to sign it for him, like I think you failed the opportunity to explain to clients, I'm thinking about when I'm not going to be here, and I feel like what's best for us is we'll eventually roll into XYZ, if that's your solution. Or I have two or three advisors underneath me that are going to be taking things over, like communicating that ahead of time. Because um, I was really successful in my younger years by being able to say, I'm not going to retire in your retirement. That's why you should become a client. When I was in my 20s and 30s, I turned 50. That's changing a little bit. And so the hard part, the hard part in succession is the advisor needs to see it through the client's eyes. And the client's not thinking until you're not there or until you're giving them a reason to think it, that wait a second, you're retiring in my retirement. I'm having to go get a different advisor at some point. And that's part of the reason why I feel like the Gen 2 solution in our firm is we have 4 or 5 folks that are in their 20s, because I can say they're not retiring in your retirement. They're going to be here when these assets change over. Our accountability to you is going to be when that happens, not how you feel today and how the performance of the accounts look today. Because I've seen a lot of advisors, I've taken in lots of clients over the years of the advisor retired and they weren't held accountable for the investment decisions they were giving the client when they were retiring, that the client's now suffering the consequences a decade or two later, either because they were too conservative, too aggressive, locked themselves up into something, who knows. And so I think it's just, in the end, succession, running the business, Gen 2 advisors, all boils back down to and God bless the government for trying to regulate this, what's best for the client? How can you have a succession where you're not in the business anymore that you actually can leave the clients better than you're servicing them now? How do you get to communicate that to them? And what does that plan look like? And can you get over yourself that that could even be possible? Um, is the opportunity that's out there, and it's playing itself out every day.
So, as a final takeaway, would you say, in your opinion, like that is what a successful exit really means to you?
Yes, a successful exit, if and when I leave, or what we put in place, is I can know that the clients are going to be able to be continued to have their best interest looked after. The systems that have been in place, the things that the clients are counting on can continue. There's a consistency there, and there's a set of eyeballs sitting at the table other than me that the client already has a relationship with, that they can continue on in my absence.
Tyson, this has been great. Is there anything else that you want to add or say to those advisors listening, the early 50 advisor who maybe hasn't gotten started? Like what's the first thing they should do, or how do they get that engine running?
Yeah, I think they need to write down or type in, uh, what do they see? What do they what do they want to be doing 10 years from now and 15 years from now? I think they should be having that conversation with those that they love, that are outside of the business, that maybe want some more of their time that's not in the business. What does that look like? And again, the problem with exit is it's instead of it looking like it's an exit is an opening going into something new. Like, let yourself think about, create the space in your time and your thought process to what would that look like? And can you go live a better life if you weren't doing this business, knowing you've left your clients in good hands? And I think it starts with just what is that for you? And if it's staying in the business, that's fine. But then you're staying in the business. So what do your loved ones have to say about that? And how do you balance that? And then what needs to change? What do you got to commit to? What do you got to stop doing? Um, I think succession needs to stop being a feeling like an end or sale or something that's bad or negative or closure versus an opportunity.
That's perfect. I love this total succession book is great. I think you're going to have a ton of success. The space framework, I think that type of design, it ties it all together in a really, really effective way. So this has been great, Tyson. I'm so happy you came on the show. I certainly love to have you back in the future, maybe your next book tour.
Sure.
This has been great. So we appreciate you coming on the Advisor Lab today.
Thank you.
This video is for informational purposes only and should not be considered or relied upon as investment advice. It may not be copied, quoted, or referenced without Cyan Investment's prior written consent. Do not rely upon any opinions, predictions, or forward-looking statements contained herein. The views expressed do not constitute an offer to sell or a solicitation to purchase securities, nor do they constitute the endorsement of a particular asset class or investment strategy. Neither Cyan Investments nor its affiliates and/or subsidiaries warrant its completeness or accuracy. Certain information contained in this video may constitute forward-looking statements that may be inherently unreliable, and actual events or results may differ materially from those reflected or contemplated herein. Cyan Investments expressly disclaims any obligation or undertaking to update or revise any information included herein. The views expressed by the guests or participants are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Cyan Investments, LLC, or any of its subsidiaries, officers, or staff. Please be aware of the real risk of loss in following any investment strategy. No investment strategy or asset class referenced herein is intended to be construed as investment advice. You should make an independent, informed decision regarding any investments or strategies only after reviewing all relevant offering or disclosure documentation with your financial professional, and after considering your objectives, risk tolerance, and best interest before making any investment in any financial product. Registered personnel should review any business development initiatives addressed herein with their respective compliance and legal departments. Coverage of such topics should not be construed as compliance or legal advice. It is at the discretion of each respective firm if such practices are consistent with firm policies and procedures.